All right, I think we've got a little bit of HTML to cover, and then we'll be able to get into some CSS for some styles. So we're going to talk about some containers: strong, EM, span, and div. Span and div we can't do too much yet yet until we learn CSS, but I'll just kind of introduce them. But strong and EM we'll be able to see something with those. Basically, with this is containers. It's kind of like I've got this big paragraph, but what if I wanted to style just something, one word inside of this paragraph, or even one letter? How do I do that? How do I select that, basically, right? Because I've got this one big P tag. So the strong tag, first of all, basically means that whatever is inside of the strong tag is important. Yeah, it's strong, it's important text. So what I want to do is I want to make the HTML, each of those letters, be important, that they stand out. So to do that, I can just go strong, and then the /strong, the end tag, goes after the H. Okay, so that allows me to select just that one letter inside of the paragraph, and it'll make it strong.
Jose, can you please go to room 382? Jose, you are needed in room 382. Thank you.
And then we can do the same thing for each of the other letters, the T and the M. Cut that and paste that, and the L, strong, and slash. And you'll now see that all of those HTML are all kind of, but by default, it makes it bold. Now you can change that. You can, later on when we learn CSS, you can say, hey, actually I want strong to have a different color, or I want it to be a different font, or a different font size, so it's larger. Like you can style that, but for now the default style is strong, means that it'll make it bold. Okay. Technically HTML shouldn't do much styling. HTML is mainly content. To describe, oh, it's a heading, it's a paragraph, but there are kind of some default styles that exist. Okay, another one is EM, which stands for emphasis. So maybe here HTML is the content of a web page. That's important. So I'm just going to put that inside of a EM tag. Again, there's an open and a close tag for EM. And again, it just means I want this to be emphasized. We can style that however we want once we learn about styles. But the default is it makes it italic, right? Italicizes it. Okay, so that's strong and EM. We could do the same thing. Actually, yeah, let's do the same thing here. Actually, I'll leave that for you as an activity. For CSS, let's put strong tags around the CSS, right? And then also is the style of a web page. I want that to be emphasized. Okay, so you can do that. All right. Now let's talk about span. Where were we? Span and div. So span is very similar to strong and EM. It allows me to select a part of a text, of part of a paragraph, let's say. So JavaScript is the programming language. It helps to make web pages interactive and dynamic. Okay, so maybe I wanted to put interactive and dynamic inside of a span tag. Okay, now if we go back to our website, you'll see interactive and dynamic, nothing happens. Okay, and that's okay for now. There is no default styles with the span tag. What this will do though, once we learn about styles, it'll allow us to select just this text inside of the span tag and apply different colors or fonts or whatever we want to it. Okay, so span is kind of like the generic strong and EM. It just means it doesn't have a real meaning to it. Like strong means I want it to be important. Emphasis, EM, is I want it to be emphasized. This is just a generic selector that doesn't have much of a meaning with it. And the same thing holds for div. A div is a container as well, but it's not a container for just parts of text. It's a container for other elements. So for example, this HTML section, I could put that inside of a div, like so. And then normally what I'd like to do is, if it's inside of a div, I'll just tab all that over. I selected it all and tabbed it over to show, oh, this div that starts and ends here is a container for all of these different elements. And again, just like span, we're not actually going to see any difference, but we'll see it later on that by selecting all these elements, I can actually tell every element of the div to have a certain style. Or I can give this div a border and it'll wrap around all of these elements, right? We could group these things all together and give it a little box, right? Put inside of a container. Anyway, like I said, the div and span don't help us without knowing styles. So let's start learning about styles. Awesome. Because my HTML is done. So this is the basic content, right? We've talked about the page structure. We've talked about headings, those HR or those horizontal rules. We can do paragraphs, comments, images, links, lists. We can build a web page with a bunch of content on it. Cool. Now let's look at the CSS, which helps us put the style onto our web page. All right. So again, W3 Schools, there's so much information here, guys, that like I just want you to learn the basics of web pages. When we get to this project here, if you want to explore more about web pages, go for it. You should have some time for that. But for now, I just want you to learn the basics of web development. And there's so much here. I'm just trying to kind of narrow it down for you guys. If you can understand all of this stuff, you're doing good. Okay. Now let's get to the CSS. Now there's a couple of ways to do CSS, but I only want you to use one of them. So I'm going to go to the CSS tutorial, and let's first look at syntax. So the basic way to do it is you select an element. So select all H1 elements, select all paragraphs, that kind of stuff. And then inside of these braces, you can do these declarations. Right? These declarations have a property and a value separated by semicolons. So this basically means select all paragraphs and make their color of the paragraphs be red, so the text color be red, and align them to be center. Cool. And we can actually see, if we click this, try it yourself, it shows us that these paragraphs are now red and they're centered. Neato. So this is the syntax of CSS. You select an element, and then you can apply all of these declarations, all these style rules, these properties and values, and it'll apply to whatever you have selected. Okay. Now, learning all the different properties and values, there's a lot, but I've tried to narrow it down for you. Again, we'll look at some of the basic ones. All right. Well, now that we know how to do CSS, where do I put it? Well, guess what? We have a style sheet. P color red. Right, so this is my selector. Select all paragraphs, and then this open and close brace kind of says here's the beginning and the end for my rules for all the paragraphs. And I'm going to do color red, and let's just do that exact example. Text align center. All right, I'll save that, and I'll go back to here. And you are probably hoping that all the paragraphs were red and centered. They are not. Okay, why not? If we go to CSS how-to, it talks about 3 ways to do CSS, to insert CSS. The external style sheet is the way that I'm going to recommend. They recommend it as well because it separates the content and the style. Right? We've got one file for all my HTML, and I've got one file for all my styles. It helps keep things clean. Otherwise, it gets jumbled together, and you'll forget, oh yeah, I styled this, and I need to change it here. All your style is in one place. So that's what I recommend. You can also do an internal style sheet where you do it in the HTML. That's not bad, but external is better. And inline styles, stay away from. That's where you do it as like a property of a tag style, and you list the things in here. That gets messy and ugly quickly. It loses many of the advantages of a style sheet. Use this method sparingly. I'm going to say actually not at all. Unfortunately, W3 Schools uses it a fair bit in their examples because they just have little small examples and it's easier. But I want you guys to always make sure that you're using an external style sheet. Okay, so we are using an external style sheet. How come it's not working? Well, the important step for external style sheets is we put our styles inside of our CSS file, but we need to link it in our HTML document. So I usually just copy and paste this. I don't think you need all the type and stuff. I think you need the rel, but not the type, whatever. We'll just copy and paste the whole thing. The href is important. It's the file name that you want to link to. So this needs to go inside of the head section of my HTML. So I'm going to go to my HTML document, and inside the head where I've got my title, just after the title, I'm going to go link. And my file is called styles.css, so I need to change this to styles.css. So this is telling, hey, HTML document, link to this style sheet to use the rules, right? These style rules that are inside of here. And that way they can talk to each other. And you can link to multiple style sheets. Sometimes for a big project, you might have multiple style sheets that you want to link to. But in this case, we'll keep it simple, we'll just have one. Okay, so now if we go back to here, you'll see that it reloaded. And there it is. All my paragraphs are centered and red. Except the A tags, their style overrides the style that I did. Anyway. Okay, that looks awful. I'm glad, so glad. So styles are great, but it's tricky to make things look good. You gotta have some good color sense and layout sense and stuff like that. Anyway, we will not do centered red. Let's change that. Let's just start with something. Maybe let's do a font family. Let's make all paragraphs be Verdana is a nice font. We'll talk more about fonts later, but for now, let's just see what that does. That changed the font to Verdana. Cool. Okay. We could also do something like, you know how you could do font style italic. So they're all italic now. Right? We used the EM before, but if you want to make an entire element, it's better to use CSS to make an entire element be italic. Anyway, all sorts of things we can do. We can play around with font size, make it like 12 pixels or something like that. Anyway, I'm losing track here. What were we trying to do? Okay, so we've talked already about an external style sheet, and we've got a link to our external style sheet in the HTML. We talked about CSS syntax, which is the selector, and then the selector and then the braces with the rules inside of it. And then selectors, we need to talk about some more. I'll probably do that in the next video, and I'll talk about comments now. Right now, we can just select all paragraphs, or we could do like, oh, let's select all H1 elements and go color purple. And let's select all H2 elements and go font family Comic Sans MS, everyone's favorite. And if we go back here now, you'll see, ooh, purple and Comic Sans, and that's great. These are called element selectors. It selects all elements, but sometimes we want to be more specific, and in the next video, we'll talk about more advanced selectors. And then comments are really easy. Again, Visual Studio Code, we can just go Control/, and the comments for CSS are a /* and a */. So you could just say, you know, style sheet for web development skills page. And again, if we get to bigger stuff, you can have a comment saying, oh, this is my styles for the navigation bar. This is my styles for the footer. This is the styles for the body. Those comments are useful for organizing your code. And the program just ignores comments, right? They're just notes for yourself. Okay. All right, let's leave it at that. I'm going to cross off this line, Control B, except for selectors. We need to talk about that a little bit more. And then we'll look at more of the types of styles that we can do. I know we played around with some of these, but we'll look at the ... There's lots more. Okay, that is our introduction into styles. Remember, common mistake that people make is to forget to do this link, right? In the head of your HTML, link to the style sheet, that external file that you have, and then these two documents know that they're working together, and this style sheet will find those elements and style them. Okay, good. That's the start of styles. I know this doesn't look great yet, but we'll get there. Okay, hope you're enjoying this. Take care, and see you in the next video.